I've always considered polls and surveys to be pretty much useless. They are always, invariably, they're always going to be biased. It is impossible to put out a poll or a survey that is not completely biased because that's, I mean, even just the wording of a question will sway people one direction or another, and they know that. And they take advantage of that. It doesn't have to be a push poll or a contrived survey. Even the ones that are supposedly unbiased, just gathering information here, even those ones are awful. I mean, they don't work. With that said, you can glean some information as long as you go in knowing that there is a potential for a shift, and you have to look at the source, you have to look at the audience, you have to look at everything to determine, is it shifting in one direction or the other. You have to look at the questions to see if that changed things. Well, a recent Gallup poll really chaps my khakis. It's one that they have. We have the story about it over at truthbasedmedia.com. Only 47% of Americans say religion is, quote unquote, very important, as religious, quote unquote, nuns reach record high. Nuns is in NONES, not as in Catholic women of whatever, the frock or whatever. For the first time in modern polling history, fewer than half of Americans, just 47%, say religion is very important in their lives. Now, this might sound discouraging. This might be like, oh my gosh, we're losing. We are, you know, I'm not going to try to sugarcoat this. We are, if you're looking at it from a volume perspective. But I would argue, and this is anecdotal, but more importantly, it is biblically driven. I would argue that those who are staying within the faith are growing in their strength. And that's not universal. Obviously there are there are plenty of people out there, maybe more than half of those in this 47% who say that religion is very important to them, either are misguided in their religious beliefs or they are lying. It's hard to find 1 out of 10 people in America who are strongly convicted by their Christian faith. There are a lot more, unfortunately, a lot more who are convicted by their Muslim faith than their Christian faith. Both Christians and Jews, generally speaking, are far less aggressive with the way that they embrace their faith, and more importantly, how they practice their faith. It's more of an identity than anything else, and this is not new. This isn't the cultural Marxism creeping in. This has been the case in America, slowly but surely becoming more and more so, really since around the 1960s and 70s. It sort of had a revival. We had a revival, I believe, a little minor one in the 80s, and then the 90s came along, internet, and then 2000s came along, and mobile devices, and all of a sudden, the shift started happening. And while there are fewer Americans today who are properly practicing their Christian faith, who aren't just looking at it as, oh, no, totally, I spend like 55 minutes in church every Sunday. That's not practicing your Christian faith. I'm not saying it's bad to go to church. I'm saying if that's how you define it, I'm gonna call somebody out, not by name. If this person hears this, it's and they remember the conversation, then they're probably going to call me out and say, so that's what you really think about me. And it is. So I remember somebody that I was going to be working with. I had asked him, let's talk about faith. We were working on a secular, a non-Christian project, but it's, I just like to know up front where I stand with people. I've actually had, it's not like, I will only work with Christians. That's not the case. But I have found that knowing going up into any relationship, whether it's business or whatever, knowing going in what a person's faith is very telling. And I asked this person, I said, let's talk about faith. Where do you stand? Where do you stand in your walk with Christ? Is it because I knew that he was at least a professed Christian? Where do you stand with your walk with Christ? And is there anything that perhaps you have thoughts about, concerns. How do you identify as a Christian? And his response was, well, look, I go to church every Sunday. And there was a pause, and I thought maybe it was a pause for dramatic effect, or he's about to bust out with, which doesn't say anything, but no, that was the extent of his answer. And in the months or years or however long it was that we were working on that particular project, it was clear. I mean, he did. He went to church most Sundays, and you couldn't. If you were interacting with him for 10 hours a day, you wouldn't even have the vaguest sense that he was a Christian. And that's unfortunate. And I am convicting myself for not doing enough to perhaps adjust that, change that, or whatever. Anyway.
Protect your family. Get your home freeze dryer to start storing food today by going to patriot.tv/harvest.
Back to the bullet points again. You can find this over at truthbasedmedia.com. Religious nuns, again, not the Catholics, religious NONESs, those with no formal religious affiliation, have reached a record high of 24%, up from just 2% in 1948. Back then, that was your identity. Today, your identity is based upon whether or not you're gay or straight, whether or not you're, what is your color, what is your whatever, what is your political affiliation. Before, back in those days, 70 years ago, people would identify the core of their identity was their faith. That's not to say that they necessarily led with that. They would be, members of a particular state or their profession or their whatever, their last name, if they were part of a family. There were a lot of different ways that people would identify, but part of it was always surrounding their faith and what they believed in. Nowadays, that doesn't even come up in most conversations. I try to bring it up in every conversation that I have. Okay, if I'm going to be talking with somebody, working with somebody, I want to know. Okay, I do. I'm just, call me old-fashioned. 57% of Americans now say they seldom or never attend religious services, up from 42% in 1992. And to be fair, I don't attend religious services myself, so I would probably fall into that 57%. I don't go to a particular church. My Bible study is familial and personal, and it's rooted in the Bible. I've tried. I've gone to a whole bunch of churches, but it seems as if, the missing out on fellowship sucks, but it's better than being guided incorrectly or inaccurately. And so far, I just haven't found one that I felt was good enough for me, but more importantly for my family. Young adults are the least religious demographic, with 35% identifying as nuns and 61% rarely or never attending services. Black Americans have experienced the steepest decline of any group, dropping from 85% calling religion very important. And this was, when I'm talking about the 40s, this was 2001 to 2005. 85% dropping down now to 63% over the previous 4 years. Republicans have held relatively steady at 64%, saying religion is very important, while Democrats have plummeted from 60% to 37% in 2 decades. And I would argue that considering people like James Tallarico in Texas, that even of those Democrats that are the 37% that claim religiosity, that they are probably, many of them, maybe most, maybe the vast majority of them, are not practicing a proper doctrine. I have a hard time believing any Democrat that says that they're a Christian, because there are direct contradictions there. Okay, it's like saying I am a health nut at 450 pounds. Okay, I never exercise. I believe in eating whatever you want to eat, but I'm a health nut. That's like saying, oh, no, I am totally a Christian and a Democrat. I am a Christian that believes in murdering babies, that believes in transing kids and going against the creation itself. Don't get me started with going down the line, and you can even talk about the less controversial components of the modern Democrat Party. I'm not saying that people couldn't have been Democrats before, and also been Christians. I'm just saying that today, 2026, Christians that identify as Democrats or Democrats that identify as Christians are either lying outwardly or lying to themselves, or both, because you can't reconcile the two. They are mutually exclusive. You're either a Bible-believing, faith-driven human being, or you're a Democrat. That's it. And I mean, there are other choices there, but I mean, when we're talking about that you can't be both and not contradict yourself. Now, that's not to say, oh, yeah, but so you're saying the Republicans are Christian. Look, I know a whole bunch of Republicans. The aforementioned gentleman I was referring to just now. I know a whole bunch of Republicans who I know that they don't sit there and get on their knees daily and pray their gratitude, pray for wisdom and discernment, pray for those who need help, pray blessings to God the Father, to Jesus Christ, to the Holy Spirit. And if you are amongst those people who maybe you go to church on Sunday, maybe you don't go to church on Sunday, but you're not really taking your faith into consideration, I want you to understand something. And I don't think this is said right by a lot of people, including me, but I consider faith to be itself is arguably the most important blessing, outside of our salvation, which of course is tied to faith. But the ability to have faith, and I shouldn't even call it an ability, the gift of faith itself is something that is profound. And I would argue that it is freely given. And yet so many people push it aside because it does get in the way. It does influence things. I've never seen an episode of Game of Thrones. And I know a lot of Christians out there who have. And the very little that I've seen, it's like, whoa, what? No. Am I an entertainment prude? You betcha. Okay? I mean, I actually go and do a search before we watch a movie. I always go to a search on Google, and I go to the parents' guide. Okay, and you can do this too. You can go just type in the name of any movie or show that you're wanting to watch, and then say whatever Game of Thrones parents' guide, right? And I don't know if it even works with shows because we so rarely watch shows. But whatever, Top Gun Maverick parents' guide. Gosh, it's been a while. But you get the idea. And then I look into it and I see, is this suitable for kids? If it's not suitable for kids, I'm sorry, but I don't want to watch it. If it's got a bunch of blood and gore, if it's got a bunch of sex and depravity, if it's got just a ton of cursing, not for me and my wife. And that's not just, with when we're watching with our kids. But again, I fall into that's the Christian way, and I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that it's not that I don't watch those movies because I'm a Christian. It's that since I'm a Christian, and since I believe in the Bible, and since I don't want to expose myself or my wife or my family to depravity, I choose not to watch those things. And I mean, if you look back at my history, my past, I came out to California 2 decades ago with my secondary. I came out here for a job, but the reason that I took the job was so that I could be in Hollywood. I wanted to write screenplays. I wanted to get into this stuff. And when I learned, again, this has been over 2 decades, when I learned that, wow, okay, so they don't like conservative topics, that became very clear. Okay, fine. I redirected. Praise God, that itself was a blessing, learning learning right up front that Clint Eastwood was the exception. That James Woods was the exception, and even both of them have had to deal with certain levels of blacklisting over the years and decades, trying to break in with conservative ideas, conservative screenplays. Not a chance. It was over and done with before I even got started. Okay, and the reason I bring that up is not to highlight my past failures. It's to point out that there was a time when I was really into movies. I mean, my wife and I, we watched movies every few days. Sometimes every other day, sometimes every day. We watched a lot of movies, good movies, bad movies, didn't matter. We liked movies, high quality movies, low quality movies, even movies that did have, yes, R-rated movies. We never watched X-rated movies, but we did watch R-rated movies. Today it would have to be there would have to be a valid reason for me to watch most R-rated movies today. Because that's just not my cup of tea. But again, I digress. Back to the article. Enough about me talking about Hollywood. Back to the article. Experts say there is no data suggesting a reversal, with generational replacement driving long-term structural decline in American religious life. In other words, there's no chance to reverse this based upon the trends. The only way to reverse this would be through an appropriate revival. And I want to be clear, I'm not a huge fan of, let's just gather a lot of people together and get a whole bunch of baptism going. I am much more of a hand-to-hand combat, spiritual combat kind of guy. Okay. I believe that I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these huge revivals and a bunch of people going and getting baptized and lining up and going to these colleges. I think there's a lot of benefit to that. But the war that we wage, the war against the powers and principalities, against the spiritual demonization of the United States of America and Western culture and the world in general, these are things that I believe have to happen at the personal level. We need to be able to address, number one, first and foremost, and above all else, ourselves. Are we spiritually aligned with what the Bible tells us? That's not to say are we perfect in our understanding of the Bible. It's not possible to be perfect. You would have to spend 10 lifetimes to just understand Genesis properly, let alone the rest of it. But, do you feel very secure, very knowledgeable with your understanding, and secure in your faith? That's first and foremost. And then spreading that out to family and to friends and perhaps to beyond that. But at the very least, starting with yourself and working your way outward, that to me is the proper spiritual battle in 2026 and beyond. And that's not to say that others are bad. I'm just saying that, can this be reversed? No. It's a trend. And as a society, we have embraced that trend. Sad as it is, it's true. The insurance you need to protect your American dream. That's the tagline for my great friends over at America First Healthcare. You can find out more for yourself. You can reach them by going to patriot.tv/health, patriot.tv/health. Check them out, see what they offer, whether it's for health, for life, for business insurance. They do a fantastic job. But that's just me saying it. I would strongly encourage you to reach out to them through that link. Talk to them and see what they can do for you. Because look, we can say, "Oh, great, it's awesome. They're America First company and blah 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 blah. They have their shared values and all that. That's great, right? It really is. But is it better? I mean, we're not going to be getting worse coverage just because we can. They might give us worse coverage, but by golly, they promote America. That's that's just not going to happen. We are practical people. My audience here at Patriot TV. But with that said, they claim, and I would encourage you to research it, but they claim that they actually have better coverage than what you get through the government-controlled healthcare systems or even many of the private healthcare offerings out there. And more importantly, perhaps for some of you, More importantly, they offer better rates with, according to their website, with thousands of insurance plans to choose from. It can feel overwhelming to find the right plan at the right price. At America First Healthcare, we take a holistic approach to make sure we find the best coverage for your exact needs. We get you better rates by helping you choose the right type and amount of coverage. Then we shop around for the best results. They can save you up to 20% on the coverage. Who couldn't use? I know we're most of us, the vast majority of us, are paying. I mean, compared to what we used to pay, my goodness, we're paying a lot. 20% right off the top. That would be a huge benefit. So reach out to my good friends over at America First Healthcare. Go to patriot.tv/health. Patriot.tv/health. Throughout the entirety of my political, I don't know, mindset understanding, all the way back to days in high school when I was promoting Ronald Reagan and Barry Goldwater and those ideologies, I have always been against ending the filibuster. It is a crucial aspect of preventing the tyranny of the majority in the in Congress. You just need a majority in the House of Representatives, but having the filibuster in the Senate made it to where they would always have to, they being senators, would always have to find some pathway that is not just purely partisan in one direction or the other. And I still, to this day, am against the idea of ending the filibuster, except for the fact that we have to. It's an absolute must. Democrats will end the filibuster the next time they control the Senate. Democrats would have already ended the filibuster during the Joe Biden era if it wasn't for Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. They were one vote shy of being able to end the filibuster, and if they could have converted either of those two people to embrace it, then it would be gone. Well, they're gone, and the only Democrat who's semi-sane in the Senate who would oppose ending the filibuster, we think he would be John Fetterman, which means that if Democrats are able to get 52 senators in the upcoming election, or if, God forbid, a Democrat were to win the presidential election in 2028 and they were able to get a mere 51, even if Fetterman's still there, then they will end the filibuster. And it is for this reason and this reason alone that I am all in favor of a preemptive filibuster strike. It is time for Republicans to get together to end the filibuster. Now, it's a lot harder than a lot of people think. There's a whole bunch of hatred right now towards John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader. And to be fair, I've always disliked the guy. I mean, since before he was Senate Majority Leader, I considered him to be basically Mitch McConnell's handler. I mean, no matter where McConnell was, you had John Thune there ready to pick up the strings and play his puppet master or move him along and take the reins. He's been McConnell's boy ever since, for years. And so, and it could be the other way around. You could argue that McConnell has been his boy for a long time. Either way, I don't like or trust John Thune. But with that said, he is in a very, very precarious situation. He came out this week and declared that he's not going to push for the talking filibuster. And his reasoning, unfortunately, is sound. He said that, in doing his research, just as Harry Reid apparently did his research, just as others have done their research in the past, the standing filibuster will not yield the results that I think most people seem to believe. And the people that are pushing for it, people like Anna Paulina Luna and Mike Lee, and their hearts are in the right places. I just don't think either they don't understand what is really entailed with a talking filibuster, or they do care and they're just, I don't know, just pretending to embrace it. Because here's the thing. Here's what would happen if Thune were to somehow get a talking filibuster to happen as far as the rules changes in the Senate. It would make it to where there would be basically unlimited debate on a particular item, in this case, the Save America Act. During that unlimited debate, Democrats will be able to throw up amendment after amendment after amendment after amendment after amendment, and go on essentially for however long they want. Republicans would have to be 100% unified. The margin in the Senate is very small, and therefore they would have to be on the floor at all times and ready to vote down every single amendment that comes across. You might say, well, that's their job, and I agree. But what if this goes on for weeks? What if it goes on for months? Which I believe it would. That would mean that everything else, any other piece of legislation that we want will be stuck waiting for the Democrats to say, okay, fine. We're done with the filibuster. We're done with this. We've got nothing else to say. We've thrown up 687 amendments that all got shot down, and nothing to see here. Let's go ahead and have a vote. And then at that point, all that would be required would be a majority vote. And yes, we could pass the Save America Act. And you might say, well, let's do that. But here's what Democrats would almost certainly do with a talking filibuster. They would filibuster the entirety of the Senate. In other words, they would hold it all the way through until Election Day, or until basically, I don't know if it would be Election Day itself, but the days or however long, maybe even weeks, to the point where, you know what, if we pass this, it's too late to have an impact on the 2026 election. In other words, the talking filibuster offers no path to pass the Save America Act in time for this election. Would it eventually pass? Maybe. And there's no guarantee of that. Keep in mind, just to be clear, it's never happened. Okay, there has been no example, no previous use of, and this is according, I have not independently verified this. This is according to Thune, which I don't know why he would say it if it wasn't true, because should be pretty easy to fact check. But there have been no previous examples of legislation properly passing as a result of a talking filibuster being seen through all the way through. Which means that the only real viable option in order to pass the Save America Act, and at this point, to get the government, the partial government shutdown opened up, and to end the 6-hour wait times at some airports, and to secure ourselves, our nation, through DHS at a time when terrorism is very likely about to happen at some point, someplace. It already has been happening. All right, it already happened in Austin. It already happened in New York City. Those are the ones that we know of. We don't know what's been thwarted or not. But we do know that we need DHS. We need TSA. I can't believe I'm saying those words, but we do. For now, we're going to need FEMA. We're going to need a lot of these things that are currently shut down. And it's unfair to those men and women who are waiting for their paychecks, who are working for free or not working at all. Oh, excuse me. Sounded like I was getting choked up there. It's because I was getting sneezed up. But I digress. So, the only viable option would be to end the filibuster itself. And that has hurdles, obviously. People say, oh, well, we're just going to end the filibuster. President Trump just says, well, we got to pass the Save America Act. I'm not going to sign anything else until we get that passed. And I appreciate the sentiment there. But what is Thune supposed to do? To eliminate the filibuster, he's going to have to get everybody to agree. That's what he's not going to get Fetterman to agree to that, to be clear. So he's got to get 50 plus JD Vance in order to eliminate the filibuster. Actually, I say that I'm not even sure if Vance's vote would count. I think that because we're talking about a Senate rule, I'm not sure. I don't know if that would apply. So let's assume that he has to get 51 senators, which 50-51 doesn't matter if he's stuck with 47 or 48. Okay, we can count on McConnell and whoever his handlers are, whoever's controlling him at weekend at McConnell's, weekend at Bernie's. They're not going to vote to end the filibuster. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, if they were to vote, they would need some sort of massive concessions, and I'm not sure that would even be allowed if they would be able to get enough. Rand Paul, from an ideological perspective, has voiced his opposition to it. And again, like I said, I agree with not ending the filibuster, but I also know that it will end, so we might as well do it ourselves. Tom Tillis just being a jerk because he is just a jerk. He's probably not going to vote for it. So right there, you got 5. You can afford 2 or 3 max. Well, we'll say 2, just for the sake of argument. You can only have 2 of the Republican senators voting against ending the filibuster in order to properly end it. And right now, we don't got it. And I don't know how to get it. This is one of those things where, because of the amplification of voices on social media and calling offices, there's no super easy way or even hard way to pressure members of the U.S. Senate to do what you want them to do. It used to be you would send harshly worded letters, you would send faxes, you would call the offices. They just set it and forget it now, right? I mean, they just put on the office when something contentious comes up. They just put on the office voicemail and sit there, and then they pay some intern or don't pay some intern or whatever to sit there and listen for anything pertinent. But for the most part, they're not really listening because it's just going to be people whining about hey, end the pass the Save America Act. What are you doing? Or hey, you're a dirtbag. Whatever. This doesn't actually apply to pressure. It doesn't do anything. In other words, so we can't go down that road. I mean, we can. I'm not saying that it's completely futile. I don't know if it is or not. I feel like it is. I don't do it. Maybe I should. Maybe more people. Maybe if we really did line up and get 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 people to stand outside or near Congress and let them know, not just the rhinos, but also, and not the rhinos plus Rand Paul plus the Democrats, let them all know that we want the Save America Act passed, that we believe in voter ID. That to Democrats, it's stupid and racist of them to think, oh my gosh, we've got to protect our minority constituents because if they're forced to have voter ID, well, that's just going to make it hard on them. It's Jim Crow 2.0. They're too stupid to get IDs. I didn't mean to say that out loud. They're too marginalized to get voter IDs. Of course, you go and you ask your average anybody of any race, do you have an ID? Yeah. Was it hard? Do you feel that it was oppressive to get the ID? Well, it sucks standing in line at the DHS, but I did it and I got it. Okay, well, cool. Well, and then that sucking at standing in line at DHS, that's universal. That's not race based. Just fact checking myself there. Point is that it's not going to be that easy, but it is the only path. And we do have one singular opportunity, I believe, at that point. We got a solution. It's not just Rucker ranting, right? We do have one possible, I don't know how viable this is, but it is at least a possible solution, is to focus on, and I can't even believe I'm saying this, but focus on ending the government shutdown, focus on, where Thune goes out there along with Mike Johnson, along with President Trump and J.D. Vance and whoever else, get everybody on the Republican side unified under the idea that, look, either, we have World Cup coming, we need DHS for that. We've got potential terrorist threats happening in the United States right now. We got to oppose that. We've got travelers that are getting stranded, that are waiting in line. We've got people working for the government, working for the people, who are not getting paid as a result. And if Democrats continue to go down this road of punishing Americans so that they can try to stop the deportation of criminal illegal aliens, which is what they're trying to do. That's the whole purpose of this, allegedly, the purpose of this shutdown. If they can get that message out, say, look, we're going to give them one last shot. We're going to have a vote. And if that vote doesn't pass to end the government shutdown, we are immediately going to go to remove the filibuster and then end the government shutdown from there. Don't even mention the Save America Act. Just tell the Democrats, look, either end the shutdown or we're ending the filibuster. That's it. Period. Give them a day or two or however many, 3 or 5, however many days you want to give them. Get the entirety of the Republican caucus behind this notion. Say, we cannot continue to ask these men and women of DHS to work for free. We cannot continue to be unsafe while we're in the middle of a war. We cannot continue to let the American people suffer through miss their flights. It's not just suffering. Oh, you got to wait an extra 30 minutes. No, people are missing their flights. People are not able. They're trying. Democrats are trying to paralyze this nation for what? So that they can end administrative warrants, make it to where it is, for all intents and purposes, impossible to deport criminal illegal aliens, which, by the way, is a majority of Americans support deporting illegal aliens, right? So you got a winner there. You got a winner with the Save America Act. The vast majority of Americans support voter ID. You've got a winner with ending the government shutdown. Vast majority of Americans don't want to miss their flights, don't want to not be protected from terrorism, don't want to everything, just the entirety of it. You got three winning issues there. Force, if you're going to pick one, fine. Let it be the ending the government shutdown, because that's the one that should be a no-brainer. And force the Democrats to either do it, end the government shutdown, so we get a good win out of that, or if they don't, then end the filibuster and clear the table. End the filibuster, get Susan Collins to explain, no, I really want TSA to not get paid. We can't end the filibuster because by golly, I want my constituents to miss their flights, or if they don't want to miss their flight, they have to get to the airport 7 hours ahead of time. I want that. Force her to say that. Force Rand Paul to say, you know what, we don't need Coast Guard or FEMA or anything like that. And force Democrats to say, you know what, fine, we'll relent because we don't want the filibuster to end, but by golly, we're still going to fight the good fight. Either way, win. It's not. There's either a little win or a big win. There's no losing if they go down that road. I mean, I guess this is the Republican Party, after all, that we're talking about. Chances are, if there is a way that they could lose, they will find a way to lose. I mean, who cares if they got three issues that the American people wildly support, majorities in the House, the Senate, and the White House, the ability to do whatever they need to get done if they can just get their crap together. Of course they're going to find a way to butcher that. I don't want to sound cynical, except that I am. I am cynical. It does suck. But there's hope. Somebody call Thune. And if he needs an explainer, he can find me on X at JD Rucker. Just send me a little DM. I've got open DMs. I can walk him through it. This shouldn't. It really shouldn't be that hard.
Freeze drying again?
Never know what could happen.
Whatever the future may bring, dinner can be certain.
Visit patriot.tv/harvest today.
Preparedness has been heavy on my mind, on my heart, on my soul for a long time, but over the last few weeks, it's actually gotten much more concentrated. It pops in my head fairly regularly, and this started before the invasion of Iran. I've been thinking about it for quite a bit. And one of the reasons that I've been promoting the Late Prepper podcast all of a sudden, after it basically sat dormant for many months, a couple of years actually. I have revived it now. Here we are, and I am doing it every day, every other day, as much as often as I can, and I will almost certainly be doing it even more in the very near future. We are dividing into very specific types of podcasts, with nearly all of them focusing not just on a topic, but also aligning that topic with the biblical worldview. And I'm always very, very careful about how I present the Bible in regards to preparedness, because on one hand, A lot of people make a semi-valid argument that, hey, if you've got faith, why do you need to prepare? And I say semi-valid because in reality, if you have faith and if that's all you've got, it's enough. Okay, you could be completely unprepared for whatever is to come, and as long as you're spiritually prepared to face anything that goes seriously wrong in the world or here in the United States of America. If you have no food, no ammunition, no gold, no meds, no nothing, if you've got your faith, then that truly is enough. Sure, it's going to suck while you're here if you aren't prepared, but by golly, that's the primary focus. Not only would I recommend, it's an imperative to understand this, that if given the choice between being completely prepared and ready and situated to go with whatever the world throws at us, that's option one. Or option two is being completely unprepared, but being right with God, believing in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, reading your Bible, praying every opportunity that you get, repenting. If those are the two options, I'll take the second one all day. I would much rather suffer now and live eternity with my Savior. With that said, why not both, right? As long as you can stay biblically grounded and focused in everything that you do, preparedness can be one of those things that you do. And there's nothing anti-biblical about it. As a matter of fact, I just did an episode about how the very first prepper in the world that we know of at least, was Joseph. Joseph, son of Jacob, went through hell on earth to get to the point to where he was able to fulfill his calling by saving his nation, saving his family, and planting the seed for the nation of Israel to grow, starting in Egypt and expanding from there. If it wasn't for his preparedness, then there would be no Israel. We'd be living in a very different world. Obviously, it was situated like that. God's plan is God's plan, and it's exactly perfect. And so, yeah, Joseph had to go through a whole bunch. One of the things that God granted him was the discernment of recognizing not just the very spiritual components of understanding and interpreting dreams, including Pharaoh's dream, but also of being able to come up with a plan that, again, led to the world being the way that it is today. Joseph was a prepper. He was not just a personal prepper. He was not just a family prepper. He was not just a local prepper or even a national prepper. He was a regional prepper. Like, for the extent of the world as he knew it relied on his preparedness, his preps, especially as it pertained to food, because he knew, based upon Pharaoh's dream, that there was going to be 7 years of famine, so he spent the 7 years of abundance accumulating. And that's where we are today. We are, I don't know what your personal situation is when it comes to life, finances, logistics, whatever, health. We are still in a position of abundance compared to how things will be, or could be, I should say, if and when things really start going south. So that's one of the reasons that I'm big on prepping. All of that is the prelude to an interview that I did earlier today that was not intended to be part of my preparedness thing. It's sort of funny. The guest during the interview was not prepared for my line of questioning as I shifted over to preparedness. But like I told you, it really has been on my mind and been on my heart for several weeks now. And so, sure, it made sense that as I was interviewing Ira Bershatsky, that we're talking about gold and silver, we're talking about the economy, and then all of a sudden I sprung on him, so are you a prepper? And his answer was very telling and very enlightening. He pointed to something that I've talked about before, but he really highlighted the importance of it, especially in certain geographical locations, such as being out here in California. With that said, I wanted to prelude his interview by discussing the need. You can call it a need, but it really is, I would say, a luxury prep, right? Gold and silver, in particular silver, and some would say in particular gold, so really we'll just classify them together. Physical gold and silver, I'm not talking about paper gold or paper silver or digital gold or digital silver or anything like that. I'm talking about the actual physical stuff that you can store in your safe at home. That can and will almost certainly play a major role in preparedness in the near future. My daughter, she has started getting into collecting comic books, and we're not talking about just going to the comic book store. Like she gets the ones that apparently you have to put them into these like thick plastic sleeves and keep them protected, and you never actually ever read them. They never actually leave the sleeve. They're there to hold value, and I appreciated that. And I explained to her that that's very prudent. Comic books are, for those who don't know, comic books are actually, in today's world at least, they are very very high quality stores of wealth. A lot of very wealthy people utilize rare comic books to store wealth because they're light, they're portable, they are, at least in today's world, they're highly liquidatable, right? You can take them and turn them into cash or whatever very easily. Easier in many cases than other, quote unquote, known collectibles. You can store a lot of value in a very little space, a very tight package, and that can be liquidated relatively quickly in today's world. Now, in the future, in a economic downturn or even an economic collapse, and especially in a God forbid a societal collapse, comic books aren't going to be the way to go. But gold and silver still will be. And I always try to explain to people that you have to look at history when understanding this, because there's a lot of people out there that say, oh, nobody's going to care about gold and silver in the apocalypse. And I would argue, yes, they will, because they always have throughout history. For the entirety of human existence, gold and silver has always held some degree of value. And that value is often exceedingly high, even in situations where people are desperate. Because there's always going to be people that aren't necessarily desperate, that are okay for now and looking to the future. And that is where gold and silver has and will, in my humble opinion, always play a role. You can also look to post-apocalyptic visions of the future in the Bible, and there gold and silver is still talked about. So it's not like, oh, it's a waste. I'm not saying, I'm not a financial advisor, go out and buy gold and silver for the apocalypse. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to make the case that as far as stores of wealth that are valuable and can be utilized today in the current scenario, as well as maintaining a separate but still present degree of value in a crap hits the fan scenario in the future, whenever that may come, gold and silver still rank at the top for me as far as ways to store value during good times and ways to store and barter value during bad times. So without further ado, here is my interview earlier today with Ira Bershatsky. The world feels like it's going crazy, as I'm sure you all have noticed. It doesn't matter which area you look at. You can look in the Middle East. Obviously, the war in Iran is taking precedence there. You can look here domestically, and we're having terrorist attacks. We're having all sorts of weirdness down in Central and South America. You've got Panama heading in one direction, Brazil seemingly heading in another, Mexico, which we stopped talking about all of a sudden. They had this huge, like, basically little mini war that took place with one of the cartels, and then that sort of fell off. And then, of course, there's still Epstein, that nobody's talking about really much anymore, even though there's still, 3.5 million pages to go through. All the while, the economy has been doing its thing. And joining us today is Ira Bershatsky from Advisor Metals. You can check him out by going to advisorbullion.com. You can go to Advisor Metals. That's his site. But I like mine better because then, he knows that there's a reason for him to come on my show. So I say go to Advisor bullion.com. But even if you go to Advisor Metals, just make sure to tell Ira that Rucker sent you. Anyway, Ira, how are you doing?
Hey there. Oh, just great. At least as good as you, if not better.
Oh, much better than me. I'm coming off the flu, and right now I can't cough or laugh without my stomach hurting and like the muscles in my stomach hurting because I was coughing so much yesterday that I think I did damage. That just means that I need to be doing more sit-ups every day, and by more, I need to be doing sit-ups. Period. So, but that's just my life. Back to your life. Your life is in gold and silver, and I have noticed that ever since we talked last, you had mentioned the the foundations being built for gold and silver, in particular with silver. It used to be 20, $30. Now it appears that that foundation is around 70, $80. We went through a spike last month, and then that dropped off real fast, but it's been pretty stabilized, and if anything, going up according to 50-day yada yada yadas. That's your realm. Tell us what is happening in the worlds of gold and silvers.
Wow, I was going to talk about the economy too, but let's get into the gold and silver. But you've kind of touched upon my thoughts there. So back before we had this big run up in silver, you had silver trading in the $20 to $30 range for a very, very long time. And occasionally it would spike 35, and then you had a meme thing, went up to near 40 or something, whatever it was. And then it went back into the 20, $30 range. And in the trading world, which I've been in for 40 years, because I was an institutional equities trader for 3 decades, you have what's called backing and filling, where it goes up a little bit, then it backs up, fills in, moves forward. And we're seeing that. You mentioned 70, 80. It's more like 80, 90 right now. It was 70, now it's 80, 90. We're kind of building that backing and filling again here at these levels. And when it is very similar to the 2030 range, when it popped to 35, we had the pop to 120, 130. Now it's down kind of to a level where it's building a foundation, building a base, to potentially move higher. And you did mention about the moving averages, which, I've been a technical analyst for over 30 years. And on Friday, the silver was just hanging below its 50-day moving average. And what I was saying then in one of my blog posts was that it's probably building the base. And then yesterday, boom, it went up significantly through the 50-day moving average and is continuing upward. The Dow Jones has been below its 50-day moving average. And even though today, which is Tuesday, the 10th of March, 2026, you have the Dow up at this point, 200-300 points today, whatever it is, still way below the 50-day moving average. Gold has been above it for several days, so that's kind of nice movement up there. And as it slows down, if it does what I call reversion to the mean, where it does go to the 50-day moving average, we'll hold it most likely and move higher. So that's kind of the treatise on the metals. On the economy, you have the Fed in a quandary. They've got all these PhDs there, and it's, the hedge funds know a lot more, it seems, than they do. The private sector always knows more than the public sector. But you have a slowing employment picture, and you have sticky inflation. Add that up, and are we looking at Jimmy Carter type stagflation, which is real worried? We have the GDP, maybe not as strong as we'd like it to be. So these are things that, Scott Bessent, who I have great respect for. I think he's a super Treasury Secretary. He's looking at those, and Trump's looking at them as well. And of course, you got the Iran war mixed in, which you had mentioned.
It's funny because I actually had to mute myself to cough right when it was like literally as you were ending is when I started to cough. And so I had to cut my cough short. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Perfect timing. You and I are in sync as always. So yeah, I'll tell you one thing. Ira and I are both out here in California. Have you gotten gas lately?
Well, I usually watch my diet, so I'm good in that area. Now, as far as the car, yeah.
Let me guess. You drive an electric vehicle, don't you?
The only thing electric vehicle in my car, I think, are the lights. Um, so yeah, the gas just jumped. I mean, so nationally it might be up like 18%. With us, it's up, 20, 30% because we're in California. I usually go to Arco, which is the cheaper kind of gas. It still meets all the federal requirements, but it's, on the lower price range. And it jumped, from three and change, 370, whatever it was, to 470. So yeah, if that's your question, that's your answer.
I paid $6 a gallon yesterday. $6 even. It was weird. You never see it even. It was actually $6 even for gas.
Not the
Um,
599.9, right?
but yes, right. 5.99.99, which I read that as $6.
Okay.
It's insane
Yeah.
that this is happening, and obviously we've got the war, but it's also, these policies out here in California are really starting to take effect. I saw on Fox News today they were talking about it, and I don't watch Fox News itself, but I saw the article on there. My question for trust me, it wasn't just about California and gas. My question for you though is, given the reactionary ways that things move in the economy, especially when we have wars and rumors of wars and stuff like that. Gold and silver tend to offer more stability. Talk about that if you would, because I'm about to ask you a prepper question, and it's going to be funny listening to the answer. But let's start with this one.
Well, it's a hard asset, and that's where it's not on a server. It's not something that it's you can touch it, and that has so much value to it. People really get, interested in the metals, especially when all this is going on. And I heard an old joke back in the early '90s after that first Gulf War. There was a trader. And at the time, right before the invasion, you saw the stock market was weakening and gold was going up. So his joke was that the Iraqi generals went to their wives and said, "Look, honey, I'm going to be gone for a while. Sell the stocks and buy gold." So, even over 30 years ago, it still holds true today. When there's turmoil, you go for the metals.
Speaking of turmoil, this I for those who don't know, I am a longtime prepper, but I try to help non-preppers out there to get there, or what I like to call late preppers. I think that everybody's eventually going to be a prepper. The question is, are they going to be a prepper now or later? Before I ask my question, because don't worry, you don't have to give me the your expertise on how to light a fire with a magnifying glass and whatever, a bottle of Vaseline. But I will ask you about the gold and silver aspect of things. But before I get to that, are you a prepper in any way? Do you have buckets of food stored away or anything like that?
Water, definitely water stored away. I remember in a previous home there was we had the water buckets, those 45-gallon or plastic things where you had the spigot on top so you could get water if the water was cut off. So yeah, I guess you can call that a prepper thing, and the especially with earthquakes and things here in California, having in the trunk of the car the survival kit, whether it's food or some the food that stays. What do you call those bricks of bars or whatever they are, along with some water and clothing, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, I call those bricks and bars and whatever they are
Mhm.
myself. Nutritional nuggets.
Yeah.
They're awful. But
Very
as it
condensed.
pertains to physical precious metals, because for those who don't know, and you can always learn more about Ira and what he does by going to advisorbullion.com. Check him out. But he doesn't well, unlike most of these companies out there that are talking about, oh, fix your retirement. Ira deals in both worlds. It doesn't matter to him whether you're rolling over or transferring an IRA, or if you just want to throw a bunch of cash and get gold and silver to put into your safe. The complaint I get from preppers sometimes, and it's become less and less over the in recent months. But before, there was one line that I used to get thrown at me anytime I would mention preparedness, and in particular silver coins, or gold coins, but silver in particular. They'd always say, "Well, you can't eat silver," and my retort has always been, you know what? Since the dawn of man, whether through feast and famine, through everything else, gold and silver have always maintained a degree of value, and humans, even in the earliest days of Genesis, they were storing away their gold and silver. I mean, you could look at the story of Joseph. Joseph, they had their 7 years of feast, and then they had 7 years of famine. And during those 7 years of famine, he was taking the food that they had stored away in Egypt, and he was trading it for land, but he was also trading it for gold and silver. He would let people come and buy with gold and silver. So point being is that in a crazy world, things that hold value such as gold and silver can be beneficial. That's my personal stance, but you get to talk to people that are actually buying gold and silver. Do they ever talk to you about, the preparedness aspect of it, the bartering aspect of it in the event of like a dollar collapse or an economic collapse of some sort, holding value within physical precious metals? Tell us, I guess, your experience, your thoughts, any anecdotal stories you might have regarding people and preparedness when it comes to gold and silver.
Oh, yes, I hear the stories all the time. And just to touch upon this, when you said people buying for cash, we only accept wired funds for compliance purposes, and people don't show up with cash. We can't do that for compliance and regulatory issues. But yeah, they talk about that all the time, and I mentioned to the people, you can get at this point, because of the price run up, if not, like, let's say a 1 ounce silver coin or bar, you can get fractional, grams. There's 31.1 grams in a troy ounce. So you can actually get smaller parts. And I always joke with the people, back when silver was $30 an ounce, they used to say, yeah, you've got this 1 ounce silver round, someone washes your car, you go, here, we're even. You charge me $30 to wash the car, here's $30, thanks, have a nice day. And it's the same thing, even if it's higher, it's all relative, so you can use it for barter. And she says, well, you can't eat silver. But it's the vehicle to get you to be able to eat something. And just as you had just mentioned, there's bartering. Maybe if the dollar collapses, they'll accept it for purchasing. And it's not on a server, it's physical. You're actually holding it. And that is worth so much. There's a lot of value to that.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the server. You mentioned a couple of times now. Of course, you're referring to cryptocurrencies, and there is a trend of somewhat of a trend that's died down a bit ever since the massive crash that really has never recovered as of now. Even though Bitcoin's up, I think above 70 as we're recording this. But either way, it was people were talking about, oh, Bitcoin to 1 million by January 1st, 2026. I was hearing that mid-year last year. It's going to hit 1 million. And, people are like, no, it'll only hit 200,000. Now we're sitting at 70K. Anyway, point is, and this is in that survival scenario, let's say the internet goes down, the grid goes down, something else goes down. If anything goes down, it's not like you'll be able to hand over, oh, no, don't worry. Let me go in the closet and grab my Bitcoin, and I'll trade that for a bucket of rice. And to be clear, I'm not opposed to Bitcoin or Ethereum or cryptocurrencies of any sort as of yet, but I do see, from a practicality perspective, obviously gold and silver are my personal favorites. Last thoughts on, well, anything. Let's go freestyle. You tell me what you want the world to hear, and I will sit back and let you say it.
Thanks. We covered a lot. What the world, I want them to hear, and I've been telling you that we've known each other about 6 years now, and I've been telling them all the time. I said, people tell me, they go, I trust JD Rucker. I trust JD Rucker. And then they contact me and they go, Ira, I trust you. And I've lost count of the amount of emails I've gotten after transactions saying, oh, thank you so much. The delivery was on time. You just talk with people. You don't push anything. You're not this salesman-y thing. You just find out what we want, what the customer wants. Why are they buying metals? And they said that's so refreshing. It's so much different than what we hear out there.
Very, very good. Ira Bershatsky. He's not that salesman-y thing. Pleasure having you, my friend. AdvisorBullion.com. Go ahead and give them your phone number, and making sure they mention the whole J.D. Rucker invocation, which, for those who don't know, if you mention my name, then Ira will thank you. And if you don't mention my name, he'll still thank you because he's a nice guy. But I'll thank you either way. So what's your phone number?
The area code is 626-788-5770.
Ira Bershatsky, always a pleasure, my friend.
Same here.
See you, brother.
Bye.